Good evening, everyone. My name is Akshay Shah, and I'm a part of the product evaluation team at InCred Wealth. Thank you for taking time out to attend this call on Roots Ventures Fund. It's essentially a private equity offering tilted towards capturing the rise in discretionary spending in India. To put more light into this investment avenue and why it should be an integral part of the portfolio, we have Mr. Yogesh Kalwani, head products and investments at InCred Wealth. Yogesh, over to you for your insights on this one.
Thanks, Akshay, and welcome everyone to this discussion or idea sharing with all the key clients and key partners. The objective of getting such unique and new ideas and thoughts were to also reflect where do we see the opportunities lie in the market, and what's our take, and where do we see clients will be benefited by investing or allocating their portfolios over the next few years. So, why this idea and why venture? I'm sure you guys have been tracking the venture industry. It's been growing quite rapidly. We have seen venture capital as an investment has evolved significantly over the last few years, and it's probably one of the best asset classes within the private equity space and has done extremely well. Venture backed startups have kind of redefined and disrupted traditional business models and have grown to become the most valuable companies. If you look at this forum and this way of addressing a wide audience across geographies, and where we can have a session with everyone who's after COVID, everyone's gone got quite comfortable with the digital access and ability to be and meet people online. Similarly, there are stories for every kind of services and products which we have seen emerge post COVID. So we have seen some huge disruptions on traditional business models, and such companies have done extremely well. That's where we felt that India, as a market itself, is seeing so many disruptions on various angles. I'm not saying only technology; it's on products, consumption, and how to be a bigger share in consumer wallet. So the great Indian consumer story of growing per capita income, larger middle class affluent market, wherein our middle class market is bigger than the population of a lot of European countries. It's a big opportunity for many entrepreneurs, etc. So higher discretionary spend, organized market from an unorganized market are secular themes which is playing out, and we have seen so many large valuable companies emerge from there. So that's where we went out looking for how do we allocate our clients' money to the space and make them a part of this investment opportunity which is there existing in the market. So that's where we came across the Roots Venture team. We like the team's fund strategy and the current investments. So here we are presenting you that opportunity given these consumer secular theme which we have in India, and high growth companies in this space. This again has a low correlation to the listed equities market. So hence we feel it merits allocation in client portfolio. So without getting into too much detailing on the product, etc., we have the experts on that side who will talk about that. Over to you, Akshay, for introduction and then product descriptions from
Uh,
Japan and team.
sure. Thanks a lot, Yogesh. Thanks for that overview. So I'll just quickly introduce. We have Japan and Ravinder from the Roots team today with us. Japan has over 2 decades of experience in financial services, working with promoters in the public and the private equity space. He's also worked in the venture capital, project and infra financing, debt restructuring, and credit. He has established two alternate asset management businesses and raised and managed 3 funds till date. Ravinder, on the other hand, also has 15 years of experience across public and private equity, project and infrastructure financing. He's one of the few professionals in the country who's experienced multiple successful fund cycles. So, with that, I just handed over to Japan and Ravinder for their comments on the fund.
Thanks, Akshay. Thank you all for this opportunity and taking time out to hear our story and our views on the consumer and consumer tech space. The way I'll take this forward is I'll quickly give you a brief background of myself, the journey that Ravinder and I have covered, and how and what we are building at Roots Ventures, and then we can keep the floor open for Q&A. Ravinder and I have collectively, between us, I think we would be one of the very few teams in the country who would have raised money 3 times, invested money thrice, and returned investor money back 3 times. And we have the experience of investing across market cycles, business cycles, and right from the life cycle of a company, from early stage to listed markets. And collectively, we have more than 20 plus exits from our investee companies, which we believe that is one of the most difficult part of our investing business, is when the proof in the pudding is when you get good exits. So that's our strength. That's we've been working together for a long time, and that's the reason we came together to set Roots Ventures up. By way of my background, I'm born and brought up in Mumbai. I started working very early. So that's from the age of 15. So after my 10th standard, I used to work in the Bombay Stock Exchange with a broker. Worked till my graduation. Did my MBA from NMIMS. Did my summer training with DSP Merrill Lynch. And I joined IDFC from campus. One of the very few guys who would have rejected a job offer from DSP Merrill Lynch, and I chose to take IDFC. And I had a very interesting and a successful 1.5 decades with IDFC Group. So when I joined them, I was the youngest to be recruited by them. I was the first non-engineer MBA recruited by them. So this is the parent original IDFC entity, which was into infra financing and policy advisory. The first 8 years of my career, from 2000 to 2008, I was involved in infra financing and policy advisory. So barring telecom, I think I've worked across all the sectors of infrastructure. We worked on PPP structures, proprietary equity investing, and the likes. And then 2008, we acquired the mutual fund platform from Standard Chartered Bank. That's when I had a business idea, which I shared with our then CEO, Group CEO, Rajiv Lal. And I told him we now have an opportunity to build an alternative investing practice, focusing on family offices and HNI investors. And he said, it's a great idea. And why don't you set it up? Because every year I have to find something new for you to do. So as luck would have it, at the age of 31, I was the youngest in the country to head a alternative investing practice. So from then onwards is when my equity fund investing journey started, and it continues. So 2008, during the global crash, we raised 450 crores of domestic money, investing in infra equity. So our parentage was infra, so we said the first one we'll do was infra. And we are possibly the only fund in India investing in infra from the 2007-9 vintage to have returned entire principal back to investors. We outperformed the Nifty Infra Index by 80% of the fund life. And I'm not sure whether you're aware, but the wealth destruction in infra equities over the last decade has been so humongous that some very big names and funds like SBI, Macquarie, Kotak's Infra Fund, 3i, which are all close to $1 billion fund size, they all struggle to return between 50 to 60, 70% of principal back to investors. The reason we were able to do that was, our approach was different and continues to be different from everybody else, where people were chasing order books. And, if you recollect those days, every new order announcement used to get, a market valuation. And we were looking at cash flows because we were realizing that the infra market was getting tougher. And we were only looking at, cash flows or imminent cash flows. And that's where we ended up on the listed side, picking up segment leaders like Gateway District Parks, turnaround stories like Sangvi Movers, Adani Ports. And on the unlisted side, almost every transaction of ours had a structure behind it, so that if things go bad, there are certain returns that assured returns that come to the investors' way. And our bigger claim to fame was we identified 197 Paytm very early, and we were the first Indian investors into Paytm from 2009-10. So that was our first fund that was close to 450 crores of domestic capital. The lesson learned from that fund was that we will never again do a sector focused fund, because when the sector tide turns around you, it's very difficult to make real returns. So we said, we might have biases and themes from time to time, but we will never commit to investing in a single narrowly defined sector. So a second fund we raised in 2011, which was a more sector agnostic fund. At that time, our big call was financial services. So if you would recollect, banking was probably languishing in 2011-12, and we had sector exposures of up to 40% in a single sector that we could take. And we kind of went aggressive on banking and financial services, and we invested very early in RBL Bank, National Stock Exchange, and IndusInd Bank. And because of Flipkart, retail stocks were starting to get shunned, and our belief was all retail will do well. And we chose to invest with Trent because we said Westside, which has its own brands and a margin expansion story. So that portfolio kind of did 23-24% gross IRRs. A 360 crore invested corpus generated a 60 crore carry for IDFC. And this is despite the fact that after Ravinder and I left IDFC, there was still some money to be invested from this fund, which we're not aware of the details, but we know from our ex-colleagues that was invested in a couple of companies which went kind of belly up. Mid of the decade, after 15 years with IDFC, I chose to move on, and with two of my ex-colleagues, we set up Sixth Sense Ventures. Again, similar style of investing, the way I had done with my IDFC funds, where we were investing from early stage to listed markets. The first fund we did together with my ex-colleagues and partners. That fund again did 3x in 3 years. We sold off 20% of the fund portfolio and returned the entire capital back to investors. After the first fund was over, I had greater clarity as to what direction I wanted to take in my fund investment career, and we kind of agreed that I'll move on after fund one. So that's when Ravinder, who was in IDFC till 2016, who had moved to Banyan Tree Private Equity after that, we got together and we set up Roots Ventures. So this was 2018 end. So the idea at Roots Ventures is we just want to do more of the same. Into two statements. One, we say we take the path less traveled, which essentially means we either identify emerging themes early, so be it or sector turnaround stories. So be it payments and wallets with Paytm very early, or a sector turnaround like financial services, or identifying again a contract manufacturing thing that we did in Sixth Sense, the first fund, or the whole health accelerated due to COVID, that we've kind of identified with our Roots Ventures Fund 1. So that's one. A corollary to that is that we have no FOMO. So we will not invest only because a sector is hot or everybody else is chasing it. Again, case in point being, last 2 years, we kind of tiptoed around fintech from this fund. We did one small investment that also predominantly catering to clients and businesses in North America. We are now looking actively at fintech when we believe the froth is kind of settled down. Similarly, current year, we've stayed out of edtech and health tech because last year, everybody was doing edtech and health tech. So we either would like to come into these sectors early, or once what we believe is that the early froth is settling down. And second is people matter. So it is about how we identify our founders and entrepreneurs that we want to partner with. Essentially, we don't only look at degrees or Ivy League pedigree. Our founders are graduates. Our founders are from Ivy Leagues. Our founders are across age groups. So we have founders who are mid-20s and early 30s to late 50s. Our founders come from smaller cities and as well as from the big metros. So for us, we make that effort of really finding the right founders, and historically we've done so, and we've been lucky in our people judgment and people choices. So these two are what we consider our investing ethos. they have been consistent across the last 12 years of our equity investing journey in various avatars. So that basis that we built our investing thesis for this fund. In this fund, we are playing a twin theme, which namely is that the disposable income of India is increasing. What we call the wallet size of the Indian consumer is increasing. And second, the nature of spend from the wallet is changing. So where somebody who is in 40 years of age is spending versus where a 20-year-old is spending is very different. And essentially, both put together are making existing consumer segments larger because we are consuming more of the same, and because of the nature of change, spend is changing, it is giving rise to newer consumer categories. So we want to benefit from these two trends, and that is what we are seeking to do from Roots Ventures Fund 1. Essentially, what does it mean? So it means that our view is over the next decade, we will see one, emergence of new consumer tech platforms. Essentially, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons of the world, which thrived during the last decade or more, will come under pressure due to regulatory reasons or competitive reasons and innovation. And we will see consumers choosing to deal more directly with vertical platforms. So that's our one bet, that emergence of new consumer platforms. Second, we believe health and wellness is a secular trend, especially amongst the premium end of the consumer market. So consumer at the premium end, not only in India, but globally, is moving towards more things natural, more things organic, more things healthy, more things which are environment friendly. Which from a small movement which started a few years back, we believe will become a full-fledged market, and COVID has only accelerated that development. And third, we believe is emergence of B2B SaaS-based technology platforms, which can potentially become B2B2C or B2C in the future. So these are the three things that we will exploit in the larger theme of expanding wallet size and changing nature of spend from the wallet. The way we will exploit into or try to benefit from these trends is we seek to invest very early. We will invest either at a seed stage or pre-series A stage as a first check into these companies, and then follow on for the next 1 or 2 rounds. So our investments will be say from typically seed or pre-series A to series B portfolio. Number of investments that we'll do will range between 15 to 18 companies in this portfolio. We've already done 10 deals in this portfolio, the largest being Smitten, SMYTTEN. It is what we call creating the pre-purchase category. It is assisting the consumer in deciding what he or she should buy. In very simple terms, Smitten enables sampling online, right? So for across consumer categories, across consumer brands, all premium consumer brands, whether they are startup brands or from very large FMCG companies, Indian and global, we enable sampling online. Sampling is one of the biggest inducer for purchase globally, but brand managers don't do enough sampling. They don't do enough sampling because managing the sampling supply chain is difficult, and the whole sampling process is very expensive. So just for example, to send us as consumers a 2 rupee or a 3 rupee shampoo sachets in newspaper actually ends up costing the brands between 30 to 40 rupees per sachet. We are solving both these problems. And because it is digital, the amount of data we are collecting in terms of what customers prefer in terms of taste, likes, skincare routines, packaging, colors, they become very, very interesting insights for helping brands come up with, newer products. So this is a company which has been started by 2 founders, Unilever, with backgrounds from Unilever, Google, and McKinsey. Since the time we invested into these companies, somewhere around October of 2019, the business has grown more than 6x on a month-on-month revenue basis. From the lows of lockdown of March last year, the business has grown almost 11x on a month-on-month revenue basis. So this is a business we followed on. We invested first during the pre-series A stage, and then we followed on with one more round of investing when some senior executives from global consumer companies like Reckitt Benckiser and Unilever from Asia were investing into it, so that we could maintain our stake. In fact, in that round, we increased our stake. So that's our large bet in emerging consumer tech platforms. Then we have invested in a company called Just Herbs. It's a luxury Ayurveda brand. You can consider it similar to Kama or Forest Essentials. However, the big differentiating factor vis-a-vis these brands or any other brand in the consumer space is we have a very strong, engaged customer base. Our customer following on Insta and Facebook is upwards of 2 lakh plus members. We actively engage with them in trying to come up with new product ideas. So a lot of the new launches that our brand does is all basis consumer feedback and what customers want us to launch. We've done 3 or 4 such launches which are very successful in the past, including a makeup remover called Saptajal, including lipsticks, which are ghee and herbal lipsticks. And there we went a step further where 16 shades of the lipsticks were named after the women who helped co-create it. And when we take these feedback as to what new to launch, we first actually create sample size products and we give it to our customers for free, take their feedback if any improvement is required, and then we launch the final product. Again, this is a business which from October or November 2019 that we invested into has grown almost 5x on a month-on-month revenue basis. And the very interesting part about this business is 90% of their sales are online, of which 70% plus sales happen on their own website. Third, we are invested in a company called Remitter. So that's our only fintech investment over the last 2 years. It is an Indian team which very quickly figured that their product market fit is more overseas rather than India. So they continue to retain their back office in India, but the founders shifted to North America, in US and Canada. And there they have created a solution for small and medium enterprises in terms of solving their payment needs. So the interesting part about payment technology is that India and China are way ahead of the world when it comes to providing B2B and B2C payment solutions. It's very interesting to know that US of all countries is pretty primitive when it comes to payment options. So we help small and medium enterprises in their payment needs. You can consider us as an alternative to the SWIFT network. We do almost real-time payment transfers for the clients and at a significant lower cost. Just to give you an idea of the scale that this business achieved, when we invested into them in December 2019, it used to process an annualized volume of close to $50 million. Last month, it processed an annualized volume of close to $650 million. This is a business which grew 20% month on month during COVID. The investment has already attracted next round investors from US, including some very senior executives from ex-executives from Google and WhatsApp, and at a premium to our invested price. Then we are invested in a company called Mind Your Fleet. Mind Your Fleet is a technology platform which solves the needs for large corporates, travel aggregators, hotels in their cab booking. So the cab bookings that we as consumers do through Ola and Uber, what we call a point-to-point market, is a significantly smaller market than the cab bookings that corporates, hotels and travel aggregators do for their customers. So for example, I'm based in Mumbai. If I'm traveling to Delhi for work, I'll have a cab come and pick me up at the airport, be with me through the day, drop me back at the airport. Similarly, when you go to a hotel, you book a cab from the hotel. So this is the market that we are talking about, and we are solving the problem of this market. What are the typical problems that this market faces? One, it's very inefficient. Most of the cab suppliers are 5, 10, 15 cab owners, and their utilization is barely around 30%. So 70% of the time, their cabs are lying idle. Uh, there are huge leakages. So most cab tie-ups that are there with large corporates or hotels, there are a lot of revenue leakages that happen because either there are wrongdoings that are happening, or when we get off the cab, we don't exactly check what the kilometers been used. We just sign off and move on, etc. And third, there are huge audit issues. Very difficult to keep a track of, in large corporates, how many people who traveled when, whether they traveled within their approved limits, and stuff like that. So just to give you an example, Unilever in India has 300 vendors supplying cabs to its various offices, factories, warehouses every month. So now you can imagine the enormity of a monthly reconciliation that Unilever needs to do across all these cabs being utilized by various employees across its offices and factories. And just to add over there, that Unilever is the first customer of Mind Your Fleet. So essentially, we are a technology layer which sits between these corporates and hotels and their cab vendors. So we don't disrupt their cab vendors. But what happens is, on a monthly basis now, instead of getting 300 vendor bills, Unilever receives one single consolidated bill, which is all digitized. So I can exactly check which employee of mine traveled on which date from where to where, using which vendor, which car, what was the pricing, like an Uber and Ola bill. Similarly, at the vendor end, vendor gets apps, one for the driver, which is like an Ola and Uber app, whereas also the vendor gets an app to figure out where at any given point of time each of its cab is in terms of real-time movement. Uh, at scale, we can also match demand and supply. So suppose if I'm a vendor with 5 cabs, and all my 5 cabs are booked. So tomorrow, if I get a 6th cab order, I will reject it. But now, because I'm on this technology platform, the platform knows that I have got a 6th demand. I don't have a car, but there is a spare car with somebody else. So that car will be provided to me, and the platform makes a fee on that. Uh, this business was impacted by COVID, but during COVID, they were able to sign up some very large corporate clients, including the likes of L'Oreal, Asian Paints, ITC, Unilever, and Amazon India were already customers. CWT, which is the largest cab provider in the country, and on month-on-month basis, now we are seeing their cab utilization going up. So since unlock has started, uh, we are seeing almost 20-25% month-on-month growth in cab utilization rates again. At scale, what happens is we become a closed marketplace. So on one side, we have vendors with all their driver and cab details with us. On the other side, we have demand coming from corporates. We match demand and supply. We charge a fee for every transaction that passes through our system, and we can also cross sell a lot of financing for our drivers and vendors, new car options, vehicle financing, repairs and maintenance, etc. So that's our fourth transaction. These are all typically pre-series A transaction. Then what we've done is we've taken bets on 4 early stage brands, all seed stage deals, where we believe are interesting niche markets, all under the health, wellness, what we categorize as good for you brands, and all started by founders who come with a lot of experience in the industry. So our first brand that we've invested in is in a brand called Captain Zack. It's a pet grooming, pet care brand. So we make pet shampoos, pet creams, pet conditioners, pet perfumes, all which are natural, non-toxic. It started by a founder who comes with a 30-year experience in the cosmetics industry, making formulations for the industry. Huge pet lover. In fact, at any given point of time, I think in his home there are around 7 to 8 pets, and he also runs a dog NGO for stray dogs. The business has scaled up very well. So from 15 lakhs of monthly sales in February of 2020, I think last month we did close to 65-70 lakhs of monthly sales. majority of this is online. And now because of things opening up, the offline demand is also starting to pick up. Then we are invested in a brand called Tea Monk. Tea Monk is into herbal teas, green teas, high-end infused teas. It started by a founder who comes with a background of being heading tea business for Unilever in multiple countries. The co-founder comes with a background in Pepsi and Reckitt Benckiser. This is a business which is currently doing close to 1 crore of monthly sales. It's scaled up from around 30 lakhs that we invested into it. This is a business again which has been invested by new investors after we have invested at a premium to our invested price. And most of this tea as of now is sold in US through Amazon US. So US tea market is a very large market, and that's what we are trying to exploit. In future, there will be opportunities to do ready to drink tea beverages also, and which we are exploring for the Indian market. Third brand we have invested into is called Supa Foods. They have two brands, a sweet corn snacking brand called Supa Corn, and a Indian traditional mithai brand called Misht. Again, founders with one founder coming with a background. He was the first CEO of Yum Foods, India subcontinent, and the other co-founder comes with a family background of manufacturing industrial kitchens. So this is a business which does offline and online both through sweet corn, various kind of sweet corn snacking, doing modern take on Indian traditional mithai. So just to give you an example, we do rice crispy coated chana dal laddu. So which kind of is usually a hit. It kind of looks like a competition to Ferrero Rocher, tasty as well as healthy at the same time. Similarly, we are trying to do a Doda Burfi bar, which is again a healthy version to a chocolate that can be eaten. And then we are invested in a brand called Plant Par. So Plant Par does plant protein based snacking. Again, started by a founder who comes with an experience of being a nutritionist in plant based food, Mumbai based. And again, that's a business which is working on, has launched a slew of products around plant-based snacking, plant-based bars, as well as now working on non-dairy alternatives. A much smaller company compared to the other brands that we've spoken about. And then we are invested in a truck marketplace called Raho. So Raho does something similar to what Mind Your Fleet does, but for the truck industry. It's basically trying to create a technology layer in between the bookings that are done by corporates for full truckloads, as well as the brokers that provide the trucks and the truck owners. This is again a business which has grown 20% month on month post lockdown. And the very interesting part about this business is most of the logistics movement business is a hugely working capital intensive business. So receivable cycles are pretty huge, whereas 90% of the business that we do at Raho is all upfront cash business. So now it's from I think 50 lakhs of monthly sales revenues that this business used to do. It's upwards of 2.5 crores of monthly revenues that they're doing now. We have a small investment here, and we are hoping to lead the next round of investments as and when they launch one. And then we are invested in a company called Railofy, along with some other investors. So we are again a smaller investor here. Chirate, which another venture fund is the leading investor over here. This is a company which is providing an insurance product for waitlisted train travelers. So essentially what it tries to do is for waitlisted train travelers, if you buy their insurance, if your ticket does not get confirmed, they will give you a flight ticket to the nearest available destination at the same price as the Tatkal ticket, and within 24 hours of your anticipated journey date. This was a company which we closed the funding round before COVID. So it's not yet launched this product. They will launch it now once train movements, long distance train movements are started in full flow. So those are 10 investments that we've done till date. Now incrementally, we are looking actively at some larger brands and financial services and the gaming space. In fact, we've just signed a term sheet in a company which is it's an interplay between gaming and investing. So we're very excited about that. And yeah, that's all about our background and what we are aiming to do at Roots Ventures, especially on Fund One. Akshay?
Thanks a lot, Japan. Thanks for that insight. I'd request Ravinder to maybe come in on the fund terms, and then we can open the floor for any questions. In the meanwhile, all participants can type the questions in the Q&A box at the bottom.
Sure, Akshay, thank you. So just before, talking about the fund terms, like Japan mentioned, so we started investing in the, towards the end of 2018. So it's been, let's say, give and take on an average. Our portfolio is just about a year old, depending upon when we actually started investing in those companies. And just on the basis of, the follow-on rounds which have happened in, a few companies of ours, we are today at 1.3x. So that is, I'm not including, places where, like Japan mentioned, so most of the companies that we've invested in, the revenues have actually gone up like 4 or 5 times. But we have only looked at companies where a follow-on round has happened, where then external investor has invested in that company. Just looking at that on a weighted average, we are at 1.3x of where we are on a average fund life of around a year. So just by doing simple mathematics, if I were to look at investors who come in today, they have a head start of around 10% IRR in terms of the gains that they go or the returns that they would possibly have compared to investors who came in, let's say, at the first close. So with that, quickly running you through the the fund terms, salient terms. So I'm sorry, there's a typo here. The tenure of the fund is 7 years after the final closing. It's not 7.5 years. So essentially, considering that we are pretty close to final closing, the fund life is 7 years. We will have a commitment period. So after the final close, we will be investing. We have a period of 2.5 years where we would be investing. Considering that we already have done 10 investments, we have signed a term sheet for the 11th one, and we have a very active pipeline of investments where we want to make the new investment. So I don't really anticipate a situation where we would be actually spending 30 months for doing our investments going forward, considering that we just want to have 15 to 16 investments put together. In terms of class of units, we have 2 classes of units, which is essentially divided as if there is a capital commitment of 10 crore, it's class A investment, and anything less than that is a class B investment. One differentiating factor, I think, which is where we stand apart from other funds, is the fact that we don't charge management fee on the capital commitment. So basically, an investor who comes in today, there would be a upfront 50% drawdown which happens. So we would be charging management fees on the drawn down amount, not on the total amount. So to that extent, depending upon the fund life, or basically on during the entire fund life, there would be at least a percentage savings which happen because of the lower fee that we're charging. And the hurdle rate is 10% for us. So essentially, in terms of broadly talking about the waterfall, the way it works is that let's say an investor who comes with rupees 100, when we start the divestment, so first rupees 100 is given to the investor. Post that, any IRR till the extent of 10%, comes to the investor, and post that the profit sharing starts between the investor and the fund manager, which is on a 80-20 basis. Yes, so I have already spoken about management fees. So I guess, yeah, that's it. The salient terms, that's the salient terms of the fund.
Thanks a lot, Ravinder. So Japan, Ravinder, we have questions which started coming in. I'll just read them out to you. So the first being that, are you also investing in few listed companies through Roots Ventures Fund?
So, so as a fund, our primary focus is to invest in, early stage businesses on the consumer and consumer tech side, which was primarily from seed to pre-seed to Series B, right? We reserve the right to opportunistically do a late stage investing, which may also include a listed investment. But do we have an active pipeline of listed investment right now? No. Can we invest? Will we? Maybe in the future, but it will not be a lot of deals. It could be just a occasional deal on the late stage or the listed side.
Perfect. One more question is, what is your criteria of investing? What due diligence, internal or external reports? If external, then basis. So basically,
That's fine.
evaluation criteria.
Yeah. So, I spoke at length about the way or what we are looking for in companies in this fund. They have to meet our investing ethos. They have to be doing something different. We have to be early into them. We need to find the right alignment with founders. After that, the business diligence is done by us as a team. The financial and the legal diligence, financial tax and legal diligence is something that we outsource with, we have a panel of diligence providers. We kind of outsource to them, but we are actively involved in terms of creating a scope of work for them. And once they've come up with their findings, we work closely with them to understand the findings and figuring out whether are there any risks which we are not willing to take. In that case, we may drop off the deal. And if the risks which are manageable and which we can, we are willing to live with, then we go ahead with those deals.
Sure. One question or one thing that maybe we can address also is the taxation on the fund. If you would like to just put some light on that.
Ravinder?
Yes, so this is a category 2 AIF. And I think the taxation laws are pretty clear now that category 2 AIFs are a pass-through structure. So the taxation is almost akin to as if the investor is directly investing into these companies. So any income that comes to the fund, we pass on the income to the investor, and it is the investor's owner's responsibility to file taxes on that.
Sure. Perfect. One more question is, what are the risks to your assumption?
I mean, they can go wrong. Our assumptions can go wrong, and I think that's where again it's important, that we come with a background of having done this over and over again, right? So in our investing businesses, that as far as we are right more times than we are wrong, that kind of makes a difference. The only thing that we can point to is that historically across business cycles and market cycles, we've been proven right more times than we've been wrong.
Perfect. How much return you expect from the fund? That's one more question on the chat box.
Akshay, you should give an answer on that. How much do you expect me to make? Anyway, I'm joking. So SEBI does not allow us to market or say what kind of returns will the fund make. Having said that, by the very nature of venture investing, we look at trying to get multi-baggers. So if we are looking to try to get multi-baggers across our investments, then hopefully the fund will also be a multi-bagger fund. And after taking into account some deals that might go wrong, it still should be giving substantial returns to the investors. At individual, what I can share is at individual deal level, we look whether these deals can generate in an average case of around 25, 30, 35% kind of IRR returns. So at a portfolio level, this all grosses up. Again, one thing I want to highlight is we have a very strong focus on our investors. So we are cognizant of the fact that our customers are our investors. We make money when our investors make money. We always make our funds small sized because we believe that in our Indian context, in the venture context, a smaller fund has a higher probability of making more money than a very large fund. And that's where, and that's again proven over and over again. So all our funds that we've done have been between 125 crores to 400, 450 crores corpus sizes. Because we believe that's easily deployable. that's deployable with giving maximum chance of good returns rather than with an eye on we making good fees, right? So that's I don't know whether I've answered or addressed sufficiently your question, but yeah, that's what I have to say on this point.
Sure. Uh, Japan, one question on exits is about what is the stage or the company stage in which you would like to exit, and what are the modes of exit?
So typically, a lot of our exits will happen by selling our stakes in companies to larger funds, whether they are private equity funds or larger venture capital funds. And we would try to, on all our winners, we will try to ride the gain for the maximum first. We will sell it at after a couple of round of fundings have happened into them. Uh, Occasionally, we are seeing a lot of interest in our companies from strategic players. So large FMCG companies, consumer companies who are keenly looking at how our consumer brands are doing. Rarely, very rare or very less frequently, we will have investments through IPOs. So as yet, we have not seen a lot of IPOs happen in venture companies in India, but regulatorily the scene is being changed, and we believe over the next 5-7 years we will see this market also grow.
Sure.
I see one question we're saying, why is it a Cat 2 fund and why not Cat 1? Because Cat 2 fund allows us to, if we choose to do even a listed investment, allows us to do that, or Cat fund does not allow us to do that. So Cat 2 allows us to straddle across the life cycle as and when we wish.
Perfect. One more variant of the exit question is, are there not any risk associated with not finding exits?
There
So,
are risks, and again, that's where we believe we are very well placed, because I don't think there are many teams or many professionals investing in this country who would have had 20 plus exits to their name. So it's never happened that we have managed a fund in our life before and we have not returned entire principal back to investors, and so we've successfully done that over and over again. We've had exits through a sale to other private equity investors. We've had exits to listing. We've had exits to structured returns. So we understand various optionalities. We understand how important exit is to the overall well-being of your returns as well as for our returns. So we only make money over here when we get you good returns. So we always have an eye on it. We believe it is possibly the most difficult part of our job, and this is something again we have done successfully over and over again over in our investing careers.
sure. Uh, Japan, we have few more questions. Again, I'm just taking the exit ones and bundling it together. So, average time frame for exits from the names discussed, are all these 7 years time stories, or may give opportunity to exit early with a 3 to 4x kind of multiple?
So this is the door-to-door tenure of the fund. We believe an average portfolio company will have a tenure between say 3.5 to 4.5 years. In some cases, we might have early exits. In some cases, it might take longer. In some cases, we may choose to remain till the last day because the companies are growing so extremely fast. Just to give you an example, in one of our investee companies, in almost just a year from our investment time, in this fund itself, and bang in the middle of COVID, we had an offer to sell our investment at almost 12-13x, right? So in some cases, it can happen very fast because the businesses are growing very fast and somebody is very interested. In some cases, it might take longer because either due to environment reasons or the business are taking slower to scale. And some cases, just the sectors are not in focus, so they come in focus later on. But on average, we should expect between 3.5 to 4.5 years average holding period for our investing companies. Door-to-door tenure is what we mentioned, and weighted average portfolio life should be around between, again, 4.5, 5 years.
Sure. Are proceeds of the exits returned or reinvested back in the fund?
Ravinder?
Yeah, so we have an optionality of reinvesting the fund during the commitment period. So let's say hypothetically, if we get an exit, during the commitment period, that is next 2.5 years, we have the option of reinvesting it, but we would do it only in the event if we see that there is a investment opportunity where we would be able, or our ROC would be much better than the cost of capital. Our first inclination would always be to return the funds to investors because that helps our IRRs, the investors as well as our IRR. So that is the first option for sure. But if there is a great opportunity which comes our way, we could take that call.
So the idea is always to return the money back. It's just an optionality built, and only for the investing period that we have the right to reinvest that money.
Perfect. So next question is on sizing, portfolio sizing. So what would be the allocation in top 5 to 7 companies, and how would you allocate among them? Can you share an example from your previous portfolios on how these allocations worked in favor or against? What are the main variables in higher allocation?
So we have a limit of on a fully invested portfolio not to go above 20% on a single company. Wherever we like investments, and the nature of, again, venture is to back your winners, right? We do early stage, so there could be failures in the future, and you want to back and ride your winners. So you want to take your investments in these companies which are growing and where you see traction happening fast to as high as possible. When fully invested portfolio, I think you will not see a single company being more than 20% of our portfolio. Historically, again, from our past companies, we in companies which we've really liked or backed, we have gone to around 15-17% as a single company. And these are companies which we have great belief in. So these, for us, fortunately, never large bets have gone wrong. They've always gone right. And that's where we, it's only when we have that conviction is when we go big onto these companies. So on your second part of the question is, how it's badly impacted a portfolio. I don't have a lot of examples, and it's Ravinder, you have one. Otherwise, it's only when we have conviction on the business model, on the founders, we really go large. And we've done that with Smitten right now. So we already invested twice. Currently, it's close to, of all our commitments out, it will be around 22% of our committed portfolio. And we are hoping to continue riding their growth as and when the new round of investors also come into it.
So just to add to what Japan mentioned, one of the benefits of doing these investments early on is the fact that we still have around 2.5 years of investing period with us. So we would be in a position to actually monitor the way the companies have been trending and the traction that they're showing. And basis that, we will have the potential to do follow-on investments into these companies. So like Japan mentioned, the idea is to just keep on backing the winners, and that will sort of maximize our returns there.
Perfect. I think one of the last questions here is at the start of the forthcoming decade, and where we are 1 year into the pandemic, it has hit consumption and disposable income across the globe. End of this decade, which is 2030, probably a bigger challenge awaits, which is climate change. What are your views on this impacting the fund?
Yeah, Akshay, I'm reading that question. This kind of just feeds into our thesis for the decade, where we believe at the premium end, people are becoming more and more aware and conscious. And I specifically said that they are becoming aware and conscious of what they are consuming, either topically or ingesting, what it is doing to themselves as well as to the environment. So we believe this trend will be a secular trend. It will continue growing, not in India and overseas, and will give rise to a lot of interesting opportunities, whether we are investing in brands. We are seeing interesting platforms, which are only clean and natural beauty platforms, which are emerging. Even climate change, we will see very interesting businesses and models coming up to, and for-profit models. I'm not only talking about impact or socially relevant business models. We will see interesting businesses emerge into this, and we keep track of them, and we are hoping that we are able to participate in some of them.
Thanks, Japan.
Just your last line of the question. I think we will benefit from this trend in the fund. I mean, we never knew that COVID is going to happen, but we already had a thesis in this fund of investing in good for you brands and good this thing and digital first brands, and that kind of we are seeing growth of all these things only accelerating post COVID.
Thanks, Japan. Thanks a lot for the insight. Uh, I'd again ask if anyone has a question, they can at the bottom of the screen type it in the Q&A box. Perfect. So I think we don't have any further questions. I'd just like to conclude by thanking everyone, all the clients who've taken time out to attend this call. Also, Japan, Ravinder, and Yogesh for taking time out. I think huge round of insight for all of us. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Akshay.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Akshay.